So picture this. It's the late 1990s, and we're in Hong Kong. Underneath all those bright neon lights, a story was unfolding that would absolutely shock the world. It's one of those cases that really forces you to look at the darkest parts of human nature, hidden where you'd least expect it. And that quote, man, it just gets right to the heart of this whole thing. You got this brutal contrast, right? The innocence of a cartoon character that so many people love, right next to just absolute horror. That juxtaposition is what makes this case so deeply, deeply unsettling. Before this case got its infamous name, it started with a person, a young woman who had a life, a story, and dreams for her future. And it's so important that we start with her. So this is her, Fan Mani. She was just 23 years old, working as a nightclub hostess, trying to make her way in the really fast-paced and sometimes pretty tough world of Hong Kong's nightlife.
And, her life was, it was a struggle. She didn't have an easy go of it. She'd grown up under tough circumstances, dealing with poverty, addiction, and just not having a stable place to call home. But the thing is, despite all of that, the people who knew her remembered this kind, soft-spoken person. She was genuinely trying to turn things around for herself.
In early 1999, Fan basically vanishes. Just gone. And for weeks, nothing. Her friends figured, maybe she just moved away, got that fresh start she was always talking about. Life in the city just kept going. But then, months later, something completely out of left field happened that would unravel this whole terrifying mystery. This is where the case just completely cracks wide open. The silence wasn't broken by some piece of DNA or a lucky break. Nope. It was broken by a story so bizarre, the police almost couldn't believe what they were hearing. So you gotta ask, right? With no body, no real leads, how on earth did anyone find out what happened to Fan Mani? Well, the answer is just as strange as it is tragic. Believe it or not, the key to this whole thing was a terrified 14-year-old girl. In May of 1999, she walks into a police station, clearly distraught, and says she's being tormented by something she saw. And the way she told her story, it's just wild. At first, she tells the cops she's being haunted, having these awful nightmares about a woman's ghost. But as she kept talking, the story got chillingly specific. She started describing a crime scene in perfect detail, finally admitting that she saw Fan Mani being held prisoner, abused, and that she died right there in that apartment. So with this girl's story, the police head to an apartment on Granville Road. And what they found inside? Well, it would become the stuff of true crime legend. This is that just horrifying contrast we were talking about. On one hand, the place is decked out with Hello Kitty stuff, plush toys, colorful posters, the whole 9 yards. A very childlike scene. But the reality was a scene of just unimaginable violence. The evidence showed signs of prolonged abuse and a truly terrible end. And this is where the case gets its awful, infamous name. Because inside a large Hello Kitty mermaid doll, investigators found Fan Mani's skull. That single, horrific detail is what seared this case into the public's memory forever. I mean, a crime this cruel, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. So what was the motive? Why was Vaughn targeted with such brutality? The reason is just disturbingly small. It all started with this small-time gangster, Chan Manlock. Apparently, Vaughn had stolen a wallet from him, and even though she paid the money back and then some, for him, that wasn't the end of it. He and his buddies kidnapped her, saying she still owed them more. And what started out as this petty attempt at extortion just spiraled into weeks and weeks of sadistic abuse. Okay, so the people responsible were caught. But taking this case to court, that was a whole other challenge. Prosecutors were up against a pretty big and unusual hurdle to get justice for Fan Mani. Here was the biggest problem for the prosecution. Because of the state of her remains, forensics couldn't determine the exact cause of death. And that one detail, it changed everything for the trial. So, because they couldn't prove the specific thing that killed her, they couldn't get a murder conviction. Instead, Chan and his accomplices were found guilty of manslaughter and unlawful imprisonment. They got long prison sentences for sure. As for the 14-year-old girl whose testimony was absolutely crucial, she was granted immunity. It's so easy to get lost in the shocking name and the gruesome details, but we have to remember this is really the story of Fan Man Yi, a woman who, yeah, she faced a lot of hardship, but she deserved safety and dignity like anyone else. Her story is this harsh reminder of just how vulnerable people on the edges of society can be, and it shows why it is so, so important to listen when someone finally gets the courage to speak up.
And that really leaves us with one big question to think about. This case is, of course, an extreme example, but it makes you ask, in our own lives, in our own communities, how do we make sure that the most vulnerable people aren't invisible? How do we make sure their voices are actually heard before it's way too late?